we do resonate and exist in certain ways in certain spaces, I really do believe that there is a relationship between the development of these types of forms and a kind of imposition of let's say a strength of secularism that is taking over society.
The interesting thing about architecture, by the way, in my view, is that as far as I can see, it's the only form of artistic expression that is something that's supposed to be beautiful and enjoyed that forcibly imposes itself upon everybody else. If you don't like a painting, you don't look at it. You go into the other room at the gallery. You know what I mean? If you don't like a bit of music, you turn it off. Although living in a modern city, maybe some music is imposed on you. But you know what I mean? Like you put a building in the center of a city, especially if it's some kind of skyscraper, and everybody has to look at that every single day. And if you want to do some sort of fancy trials with art about new ways to see beauty, fine, but consign it to the museum and make sure the museum on the outside follows the well accepted psychological laws of the way.
Don't make these huge monsters.
Think.
Your intuition is right. Architecture is probably the last residue of what I believe art to be for. It is the most important art. Architecture and city planning are the most important of the arts because they bind the space in which you experience reality. And therefore they actually, let's say subtly, more than subtly, but they invisibly create, the way in which you understand inside, outside, the way in which you understand hierarchy, the way in which you understand, the relationship of functions to themselves, right? It's like how you organize space. A house, a building, a public building will have an effect on how you understand the way in which that thing happens. And so it's very important. It's radically important to, let's say, I think that architecture and city planning are one of the places where people who believe very much that humans have a nature, that they should be fighting in that sphere more than social media and all this culture war, whatever nonsense. But architecture is the place where we're actually framing human experience. There are movements, I don't know if you know a bit about what's called new urbanism, which is a movement towards the rehumanization of cities and to create things like parks. You live in the UK, and so you don't have the same experience as we do in North America, which is just the suburb and the malls and the highways, where there's no center, there's no human scale, there's no place to congregate, to walk, there's no public space, there's no public square where you can actually come and meet your neighbors and meet people that you know. There's a quantification of human experience and a reduction of the human to a dot, basically on a flat map. And so there's this desire to recreate neighborhoods and to create alleys and places where you can walk and you can congregate, fountains, all of this type of thing. Let's say a small town, there's a church in the small town. The church is usually in a central space, if not in the actual center of the church of the town. It is taller than the other buildings for a reason, because it is the vector of unity. So we're all there, and if we look around, the thing that we see that's taller than everything else is actually the thing that binds us together as a community. And so we go there, we celebrate the things that bind us together, the things that unify us, the things that are related to our origins. So we have weddings and baptisms and deaths, and all of these things we celebrate at the place that binds us together. So there's an actual coherence to the way in which it's a medieval city would manifest themselves, which is with this building at the middle. The church is an organic part of the unity of the town itself. It's not just an artistic statement or the way we understand how we make art today. And it's not even just architecture. It is that, right? It's a beacon of unity.
When somebody's building a skyscraper, I understand, residential blocks and functionally trying to house people. But if you're building the Shard, London's tallest building, I mean, sure, there's a sense in which the Shard is quite pretty. It's a slightly explorative form of art. But some of these skyscrapers, the walkie-talkie, these seem to be. I don't understand why it is the case that they can't also have a similar devotion to to beauty that would have existed in something like an old church. Like, why is it? I understand why every now and again you build a skyscraper, somebody takes a risk and it goes wrong. But it seems like every skyscraper we build is an exercise. It's like testing people's assumptions about the subjectivity of art. It's like, it's like God is laughing at us in saying that, when we decide that beauty is subjective and it's just your opinion, man, he's like, well, try living here for a couple of years.
Yeah, let's just see what happens if you do
see
live
how it
that
goes,
way.
see how you like it. But I don't understand why that's the case. Like, why does this happen?
Critical thinking is that which is worshipped, like the idea that criticizing is more powerful, and there's a kind of smartness of criticizing, and there's a kind of naive stupidity of believing and having faith in something. If you believe something, if you have faith in something, you should have you should be cynical about it, right? You should be cynical about the things that bind us together. And so this is woven through our society at all kinds of levels. There's also this idea that innovation is an untrammeled good. Innovation is a good in itself. There's no question about it. So we think that in technology, we think that in all kinds of ways. And then we also think that in art. The idea that because something is new and because it's something that I haven't seen before, it is therefore a good. That is, of course, I think, ridiculous. It's a ridiculous idea. That is, human goodness and human capacity to participate in goodness is based on how humans are made. It's based on human nature. And the idea that just because something is new makes it necessarily good, I think is a problem running through human society in general right now.
Do you think there's a similar bias going on in the opposite direction, where people assume that because something is old, it is beautiful, and because something is old, it is worth preserving?
A way to understand the fact that old things survive is to understand it actually through a Darwinian process, to understand it through a kind of evolutionary process, which is that humans remember certain things and preserve certain things. And it doesn't happen over a thousand years. It happens over a few decades. And over a few decades, some things are preserved and some things are not. And some things are maintained and some things are not. And also some things are cared about and some things aren't. So if you create a building, let's say 1,000 years ago, and people care for it, they are impressed by it, they love it, and they want to maintain it, it will preserve itself. So there are so many buildings that have been destroyed for thousands of years. But there are some that are preserved, and those are not preserved for arbitrary reasons. And they're not preserved over 2,000 years. They're preserved over decade, year after year after year. Somewhat of a guarantee. It's not 100% guarantee. It's not just that something is old, but it's that something has been kept and preserved and maintained, for all this time.
Yes, I think that makes sense.